The views expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of 94.9 CHRW.
Little boxes on the hillside.
Little boxes made of ticky-tacky.
Little boxes on the hillside.
Little boxes all the same.
There's a green one and a pink one and a blue one and a yellow one.
And they're all made out of ticky-tacky. And they all look just the same.
And the people in the houses all went to the university.
Well, they were put in boxes. And they came out all the same.
And there's doctors and lawyers and business executives.
And they're all made out of ticky-tacky.
And they
all look just the same.
Good morning, London. It is Thursday, November 1st, 2012. I'm Bob Metz.
And I'm Robert Vaughan.
And this is Just Right on CHRW 94.9 FM.
And we'll be with you from now until noon.
No, not right wing. Just right.
Fade into color and color into black and white. Under the bedclothes, everything will be alright.
And as always, 519-661-3600 is a number you can call to reach us if you'd like to join in on today's conversation, and I expect it's going to be a hot one today. Have a guest in the studio with us today. He's one of those folks who's been there or done that, and that's why he's here now doing this, joining us in a discussion of just what's wrong down at London City Hall and how we might be able, perhaps, to take a look and fix it. None other than former city controller, past deputy mayor, past acting director of facilities and engineering at UWO, ex-VP at the hospital, 25 years on council. My goodness, you are a fellow who has had a hands-on experience. Orlando Zamprogna, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I'll tell you, today's show is going to be interesting because I'm not even sure which direction it's going to eventually go in. But I heard you on Andy Uthman's show on another station last week, speaking about, of course, the mayor's dilemma currently in the city, Mayor Joe Fontana, who now is becoming notorious from coast to coast again. And you said some things that I thought were a little bit, shall I say, alarming about your experience in the past. And you mentioned in the light of all of this going on right now, quote, "It's going to get ugly. It was ugly when Jane Bigelow took over." And then you said, and this was very interesting, you said, "I got out because I couldn't stand it any longer," speaking of municipal politics. And you said, "Not because I was devoid of ideas or willingness or desire. I got out because I saw what was coming." And unfortunately, Andy didn't follow that up with you, so I want to follow that up with you today. And you also mentioned, you said you should just see what happened with Jane Bigelow to see what kind of skills you need to stay in politics. What's the story behind some of those comments?
Well, I suppose that over a period of time, such as the time that I've gone through, one finds a generational gap or a cultural gap or some kind of gap. And the gap I found is the mentality towards handling of money and handling responsibility. And I found the second time around when I went into city council that the gap had widened and I was no longer current in being fiscally responsible because I was told, quote unquote, by the leadership of the council at that time that the city had a lot of borrowing capacity and why shouldn't they use it? To which I replied, look, I have a lot of credit cards too, and I have a lot of borrowing capacity, but I don't use it because I know I have to pay it back someday. And if I run into trouble, then I have less choices to be made. Somebody else makes the choices for me, and I don't like that. That was the first thing that tipped me off that things had changed. And the second thing is that there was less of a responsibility on the part of the city council members, including the leadership, towards exercising their part of their work, that is to oversee the activities of the administration, oversee the activities of the policies and of the budget. They simply said, well, we have to trust the administration. And my view was, it's not a matter of trust. It's a matter of why are you here? Why are you being elected? And to me, the oversee factor was drifting away. And
or Oz. I think you'd like to be called Oz.
I am Oz, yes.
Okay, Oz. I was a trustee on the Board of Education, London Board and Thames Valley Board for about 6 years, and that is my biggest complaint that I ever had, was that the elected trustees who were there to look after the people's money and people's interest were, as one councillor put it, sheep to the administration. Whatever the administration wanted, they got. And they were a bunch of rubber stamps, with a couple of exceptions. Do you find that that's the case at City Hall? Was it the case when you were there, and is it the case now?
Well, it's been drifting towards that very dramatically. And they've even gotten so out of touch to the point where they just simply look, for instance, at the tax rate. Well, that's just a percentage number. What they should be looking at is the increase in spending from year to year. And if you were to look over the last 10 to 12 years, you would find that the increase in spending is outstripped cost of living plus inflation, and that to me is not reasonable.
Is it the big mega projects that are causing this increase?
No. It's just the operational parts of the municipality that are gotten out of hand. And you see, at the end of the year, there's always money left over because of incremental assessment. Well, that gets built into the base for next year's tax rate. So that component just automatically creeps up. But you never really know, because all this ever advertises the tax increase. But the tax increase is based on a different level than what you left off last year. And so there is creep into that. And the politicians ought to be there to pick that off and to say, no. That money that's left over belongs to the taxpayer, not to the administration to develop a higher rate.
You know, that speaks to a fundamental issue, and I ask this of all my civic guests who come here to talk about the municipal scene. And I often wondered, do you yourself personally view the government more like it is the corporation of the City of London? Do you regard it as more of a corporation or a government? Or is it a bit of both? And is that structure perhaps part of the problem that we're having? I'm always curious about that.
I think the problem is very complex. We have several structural problems. The first one is, as I say, the politician forgot the reason why they're there, and that's to oversee the administration and to be very responsible to the public for their money. The second is to insist on efficiency and good management. You got to remember that municipalities, when you get right down to it, are just managers for the province. They're not holy governments that make their own decisions outside of federal and provincial politics. They are managed. They're managed by people elected, of course, but responsible for the Municipal Act and the Police Act and all those legislations that are put in their place. They're basically managers of the municipality. They see themselves, though, as politicians making huge policies without worrying so much about the money.
This is what has concerned me of late, is that you get elected as a city councillor, and because a lot of what you do is already mandated by the province, there's very little left over for you to make your stamp as a politician or a man of the people. And so therefore you get people proposing legislation for bylaws that are very intrusive, and some of them are just out of this world nutty. But they're brought forward to make a stamp, to make a statement that, hey, I brought this forward, whether it's off-leash dog parks, smoking bans, or bans on this or that, or sign laws. That do you find that that's the problem?
Oh, certainly. A lot is exaggeration and grandstanding, and that's problematic because it takes away from the focus of what they're supposed to do. But just because the province wants to enact legislation, they have people there that should be knowledgeable in advance of the legislation. They have a system which can lobby the province and say, look, this cannot go through. We're having problems. If you pass that, it's going to cost us a whole lot of money. Sounds great for you, but we can't afford it. And they should be more proactive in that regard. We used to be. I mean, I recall many times with the past mayors, we used to have delegations to go see cabinet ministers at both levels and say, stop this nonsense.
Really?
You can't do that. You're gonna cause serious problems. And here's the details that we have available to you, more knowledgeable than what your own administration has given you. So there are ways of doing that. And even within the policies that quite often are not good from the province of Ontario, there is opportunity to deviate or to change or to amend or to bend and to have understandings. But you can always become efficient in any regard. And I don't see a whole lot of that happening. And that's probably what I saw in the year 2000 when I finally called it quits.
So looking at the politicians, personally, I only see Paul Van Meerbergen as being the one who really thinks of the taxpayer first. I always see him as the taxpayer's representative. And the rest of them, I feel like they all have their own agendas. Is my sense incorrect in that?
Oh, I wouldn't call anything incorrect. I've been around too long for that. But I would say that Paul Van Meerbergen is a very conscious and conscientious fellow. Unfortunately, he has to be sometimes overbearing on a topic because nobody else picks up on it. And that's too bad because he makes a lot of sense. And it's unfortunate that other people don't see themselves as manager of the public trust and of the public fund.
I often see him in the same position as I used to look at Robert when Robert was on the Board of Ed. He seemed to be the one guy there that was playing the Paul Van Meerbergen role. And you must have felt a little alone from time to time, eh, Robert?
Well, there were a couple of other trustees who from time to time I would get along with on a fiscal idea. But my point at the Board of Education was that I would never vote in favor of a budget as long as I could see waste somewhere and point it out and have it fixed, which meant that I never ever voted for a budget of the 6 that came on my desk. Now, contrast that to, for example, Joe Fontana and the clique that he has around him, who are saying that we're going to vote for 0%, a figure just out of the air, 0%, regardless of the consequences for or against expenditures in the budget of the city. I think it's a much more prudent attitude to take that you're not going to vote for a budget as long as you see waste. And if you can point it out and get rid of it, then you can vote for a budget. What do you think about that, Oz?
I'm not sure that waste gets used and overused over the years. I've seen it happen in Toronto, and it's been used in many areas. More importantly, I think that there is a fattening up of budgets, put it that way, where administration covers. We had a situation once where we just simply said, no more contingencies. The politicians will manage the contingencies. Point, stop, that's it. We took it all contingencies just came out of the budget, and guess what? It got reduced by a dramatic amount, something like 2%. So
if you allow for a contingency, people being what they are, they'll find a way to spend it.
Of course. And we just simply said, no more. And on top of that, we went through the budget books. We even changed the format of the budget so we could see exactly how the money was being spent. It takes time, it takes knowledge, it takes perseverance, but we spent the time and we provided the knowledge and the perseverance, and I think we were more prudent. In fact, as I recall, we had a very, very low debt, something like 16 million and something like 80 million in reserve funds set aside. And people didn't seem to mind. So I think what's happened is the politicians have gotten caught into this tax percent issue and don't really look at the management, don't really look at how much money they're really spending to achieve satisfaction for the public. Not happiness or everybody gets what they want, just plain satisfaction. And perhaps sometimes saying, can't give it to you this year, you might have to wait 2 or 3 years. Rome wasn't built in a day. It was something I used to say a lot.
Now, I certainly don't want to make this the subject of the show today, but when we return, I do want to ask you, do you think Joe Fontana is in trouble over this current dilemma that he's in? And we'll be back in just a minute.
Okay.
Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, little boxes on the hillside, little boxes all the same.
And there's doctors and lawyers and business executives, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same.
and the boys go into business and marry and raise a family.
And boxes made of ticky-tacky and they all look just the same.
There's a pink one and a green one
And a blue one and a yellow one.
and they're all made out of ticky-tacky and they all look just the same.
Right now, we're on the campus of a university, sitting on our own little box called CHRW Radio, where you can call 519-661-3600 to join in the conversation. Now, we're here with the wizard who is Oz, Orlando Zamprogna, who has had a lot of experience in City Hall, and of course the mayor is now under pressure over something that happened to him while he was a minister in the federal government. And I have to cite this comment that he made that was printed on the front page of the Free Press, in which, over the spending allegations that the government paid for his son's wedding reception back in 2005, he has written, quote, "I am confident a thorough and fair review will clearly demonstrate all transactions were proper and valid." Now, when I read that, I didn't read that he didn't say that they didn't pay for it. He just said the transactions were proper and valid. Is it possible that they did pay for it and it was still proper and valid? Is this common? You know what I'm asking?
We'd have to go back to the days when the Prime Minister was a Liberal and they got caught in this famous scandal, and God knows what those people were doing and what they were spending. I mean, only a small amount came out on the inquiry because it was limited to only certain areas. So who knows what people found to be valid and proper in those days. So I can't respond to that, but I would say it would be at least material to a person's habit or way of doing things, if indeed it turns out that the government paid for a personal expense. It would not be a good thing. It would be a bad thing.
It would be a bad thing, but not necessarily for Joe Fontana, wouldn't it? If if it's found that he actually operated within the rules of the government of the day. For example, we see government and business writing off expenses that you and I would think that, hey, we shouldn't be writing that off. But if you find out that, well, a lot of ministers were invited to this event, a lot of business people were invited to this event, and therefore it falls under this particular clause of a business expense and yada, yada, it could very well be that such a thing could be legitimate in the eyes of the government and perhaps, as you say, perhaps not an indictable offense.
I suspect that the jury is not black and white here. It's a very mixed bag. We see it in a poor light because it's been cast in extremely poor light from starting position. From my own point of view, I personally would never, ever ask the government or any government to pay for my expenses. But I have had my own standards, which I hold dear, and certain others would find it more compatible to call it a government expense, I suppose. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. In the meantime, there's a lot of grandstanding going on, and I noticed that some people are calling for resignations and stepping down. Well, that's way too premature. Not only that, but the council has no right to ask the mayor to step down unless there is a criminal offense.
What I find interesting, Oz, is that the people who are calling for him to step aside for the moment are saying that it's just distracting to the business of the day. And I find that rather hypocritical because the distraction are these people themselves bringing this whole thing up. If they just got on with the business of the day, this wouldn't be a distraction.
Of course, and as I mentioned, you made reference to a radio show. It was also referenced to the newspaper in town. That not only is this ugly, but it's distracting, and that most people see themselves as capable mayors anyhow, and they're sitting there wondering what they can get out of it. And guess what? That's exactly what's happening. Some are more obvious than others. They're just trying to see an opportunity to take over. And that's despicable in my view.
I think that's about all we really want to say specifically about Joe Fontana's situation today. I really want to learn more about some of the background of how City Hall operates, some of the way they set rates. And you brought up something interesting before we went to air about how they set water rates in the City of London. And you said it was also an example of how I guess City Hall looks at the bigger picture too. How did you mean that exactly?
Well, originally, water rates were part of taxation. And when the time came to flip them over into a pay-as-you-go scheme, there were two questions in my mind. And the first was, if you're going to go pay-as-you-go, do you automatically reduce my taxation, which was previously to this was in my annual rate? And of course, the administration didn't want to do that, which is one of the political responsibilities, to remind them that they can't be that greedy and that willing to accept two parts of the money. So that there's a reason for having politicians. The second question that I had was, well, when the rates go on a pay-as-you-go basis, people will use less. And when they use less, will you now be changing your overhead? Cut back on your overhead costs because you'll be receiving less money. And to my knowledge, I don't think that has happened to the degree that it should, for sure.
So you saw this happening,
of course.
And you warned them about it
Yes.
many years ago.
Yes.
At least 10 years ago.
Oh, more than that.
More than 10 years ago,
Yes.
and now all of a sudden we're in a crunch.
Yes.
Because they didn't listen.
Well, of course, the administration wants more money. When you think of two other components here that are very, very telling, first of all, the water mains are large. But they're large for one main reason, because of firefighting. Firefighting now is a municipal responsibility covered by taxation. And yet, we're supposed to be paying for all of that out of a pay-as-you-go. So there is a dichotomy here. And the second thing that I find incredible is that people already have paid for the infrastructure that's in the ground. And if you build a new home, not only do you pay for your own, but you also pick up the taxes for everybody else's. Now, what the administration wants, and this has been supported by the province of Ontario, they want more money for the replacement of capital, which is not likely to happen for another 10 to 20 years. Well, I'm sorry. That should be borne by the tax rate or the expense rate of the people that are around 10 to 20 years from now. So it's this intradisciplinary or intragenerational taxation that's taking place, which I find very bad, and a very bad system which the province has put in place. It's not right to ask people today to pay for future money. If you're going to do it for that particular area, do it for everything else and see what happens to the province of Ontario.
This seems to be an inverse of what we've had in the past, where you borrow, where people in the future pay for what we're doing today. Now we today are paying for what people in the future are going to consume.
My point exactly. I think the province of Ontario has done a lot of bad legislation, and this is just one of them.
One of the things that's always disturbed me about municipal politics is the very idea of a property tax base. I could see a property tax base as being for services that home receives from the city, but it's certainly expanded into something far beyond that. And today's property taxes look like yesterday's mortgage payments, if you know what I mean. Yeah. And you never feel like you own your property. And it seems to erode at the very concept of ownership. I did ask Mayor Joe Fontana when he was on another radio station whether he would like the idea of seeing some municipalities, as they have done in certain areas, move to a consumption tax rather than an assessment-based property tax. Now, he jumped at that suggestion, but again, as you say, not instead of, on top of the assessment base, but what I was intimating was get rid of the assessment, go to a consumption tax. Has that been workable in any cities that you've seen, or do you know of any?
The problem is that whenever you make changes in the property tax base, the administration and the policymakers take advantage of the poor-paying public. And so they will do a double shift or a double taxation. So you have to be very leery of making changes because that's exactly what happens. No, it has not happened to that degree. I mean, a long time ago, it was all based on fee-for-service. And then governments came along and decided that money should be spread and people should pay the same. In other words, the level of socialism grew. Mm-hmm. And now it's grown to the point where everybody has to pay for everything. And then probably this is would be a good time to start asking, well, am I really using it? People are not using what used to be the John Labatt Center, yet they're paying huge sums of money to support the borrowings that went on for that.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's been a craw on my side for years, and I keep hearing, I've even heard talk show hosts and others saying, oh, it's been a success. It's bringing in the big acts, it's bringing in a lot of money, and it's making a profit, which is now called the Budweiser Gardens. You would think that that's not the case. Is that right?
I get angry, literally angry, when I hear people talk like that. Yes, it is a nice thing to have. Yes, it brings nice acts. Yes, it gives a certain level of vitality, and I'm all for it. But eventually you have to ask yourself the question, who pays? And where does the money go? Consider two things. The first is that the deal that was struck with the present organizers or managers of it allows them to pay based on net profits. Well, that means that they can write off just about everything. Secondly, the city paid for the building and the land, and the taxpayer has been paying something like $2.5 million a year in taxes to cover for that and getting about, $150,000-$200,000 back. Big deal, excuse me. Thirdly, because the city leased the land in which the building is built, they pay no tax. I don't think people know that. The city used to earn $300,000 a year from parking revenue on that lot. Mm-hmm. They don't even earn that anymore. That's the first thing that's wrong. The second thing that's wrong is a lot of politicians get screaming mad about casinos because they're a drain on the public purse. They suck up money from the local economy and it goes to the province, but at least some of that comes back in the form of hospital support and so on and so forth. Consider that the Budweiser Center probably earns in the range of, say, $40 to $60 million a year from acts. Now, most of those acts, by far the majority, are from outside of Canada. Mm-hmm. That money is now sucked out of the local economy, most of it, and goes to the United States. You ever think of that? Imagine a system here that is nothing but a pipeline that is almost like cross-border shopping in reverse.
Now, the Budweiser Gardens is one example of a big mega project, which is not necessarily something that every Londoner benefits from. You have those kinds of things. You have convention center, you have museums, things like that. Big mega projects. They're thinking now of having a performing arts center, and that's going to come down the pipe very soon, and I bet you we're probably going to get that too. What is the proper function of a municipal government? Is it to provide these kinds of circuses, or is it to provide fundamentals like sewers, water, roads?
Yeah, it almost seems like the city's turned into an entertainment center more than a basic services center.
You really have to look back about 2,000 years and find out that the Romans were in the same problem.
Were you on the council then?
Probably. I've been around long enough and I've read enough about it. And the Romans found out that in order to keep the people quiet, they had to give them circuses. That's why they built the Colosseum.
Bread and circuses, yes.
No question.
The monument builders.
Build the circus, keep the public quiet, and the public swallows it and they think it's great for a while until they have to pay for it. And now, guess what? Every single government is in debt so far that they have very little wiggle room. We are on the verge of a major confrontation.
A number of cities in North America have already declared bankruptcy because of things like this.
We are on the verge of a major confrontation with reality. And not only that, but people themselves have no money. They've spent their credit cards.
I see that coming,
now we build more mausoleums, more whatever. Guess who? And it's just not doable in the present circumstance with the present situation. I like that. I like a performing arts center. I was very much in favor of it. Still am. Love to see it. But I like to see what happens about who pays for it. I can still recall when the well-to-do people in the city got together and built the art gallery. Well, that was a very nice thing, and I like art. And I go to all the art galleries in the world whenever I get around to it. Unfortunately, very soon it became an operating problem. And guess who picks up the tab? And nobody wants to talk about that. They don't even want to charge money for entrance because, after all, these things should be readily available. Why? Why shouldn't it? Why? If that is so valuable and so useful, why isn't it being part of our culture? And if it is part of our culture, why shouldn't we pay to go in there to sustain it? And I think we've gotten so far away from that mentality that there is no turning back right now. And I'm sorry to say, we have a problem.
We do. And we'll have to talk more about that problem when we return. We're at the bottom of the hour already, and we are in conversation with former London Controller Orlando Zamprogna, the Oz, and he'll be back with us after these important messages.
Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, little boxes on the hillside, little boxes all the same. There's a green one and a pink one, and a blue one and a yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same. And the people in the houses all went to the university, where they were put in boxes and they all came out the same. And there's doctors and lawyers and business executives, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same.
Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, little boxes on the hillside, little boxes all the same. There's a green one and a pink one and a blue one and a yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same. And the people in the houses all went to the university, where they were all put into boxes, and they all came out the same. And there's doctors, and there's lawyers, and there's business executives, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same.
And we're here with Orlando Zamprogna in the studios today, talking about municipal politics. And Orlando, I wanted to ask you about the abolishment of the Board of Control. I was opposed to it at the time. A number of people were. It seemed to have gone ahead, along with a reapportionment of our ward system and all that. Good or bad in terms of the idea behind it and how it's turned out?
Well, the idea that was given was to reduce the size of government, and it was an easy step to say, well, we'll abolish Board of Control. There goes 4 people. And by the way, look at the money we save, 35,000 times 4 or whatever. And off we go with a smaller, more efficient, better council geared to the speed of today. Well, it hasn't turned out that way. It hasn't turned out that way for 2 reasons. First of all, they are finding out that to continue the democratic process where they become involved with the public, they need the time. And they need the people, so to speak. And now these people are asking for secretarial help. They want additional staff to do investigation for them, to do research. They want more money. They want to become full-time, by the way, which is...
I could never understand that, Oz.
Well, that was the hidden agenda.
Because what do they make with the officer's allowance, which is about a third of their pay, which is tax-free? I think they're making close to over $40,000 a year, aren't they?
That's right.
That's more than a full-time salary for probably half the city. Half the city doesn't make that kind of money, and they work full-time. What does this mean to call them full-time?
Well,
they can certainly work full-time if they wish.
Well, they want more money.
That's the euphemism, isn't it?
Let's get down to brass tacks here. They want to be paid more. They're career politicians. They don't do a heck of a lot else, frankly. Quite a few of them don't. Mm-hmm. Some of them do. Some of them reasonable, legal jobs and whatever. And so they become more important. They're full-time and they're, in a way, they get in the way of the administration, too. While they should be monitoring, they become imbued into the administrative process, and that's wrong. The other thing is that now without a Board of Control, which used to have a continuous access to the day-to-day actions of the city, because we were there, and we had immediate access to all the administration, they now find that they don't have a succession plan. anything happens to the mayor, which happened in my time when Fred Gosnell got ill, we had a succession path. The deputy mayor, which is Jane Bigelow, took over as acting mayor, and eventually we got around to deciding who would be the successor. But there is no succession. There is no one person there outside of the mayor who has citywide support.
That's right. The PUC were elected at large across the city. Not PUC, sorry, the Board of Control, elected at large. So, yes, everybody had a say in who the deputy mayor was because it was voted in across the town. But now every councillor has their own little fiefdom, and we actually see that. A number of councillors out there are saying, I'm walking the beat of my little ward here, and I'm going to fight for my ward, which is fine and good, but only one person has the city at large in their mind, and that, of course, now is the mayor. With no deputy mayor, no board of control?
No, it's actually a gap and a void which needs to be filled. And the board of control actually was a reasonable way of doing it. Some municipalities looked at it, but they got around it by developing internal political parties. And if you don't have a political party to be accountable, then you have to have something else. And now we have, here in London, we don't have a political party. We have little cliques, which substitute for political parties without accountability. And that's about the worst of all worlds. And so we have a bad system here right now. And if you look at it, there are two distinct cliques in local government, and it will not heal.
Like, as in different cultures, practically. Is that what you mean?
Well, there seems to be two groups of people that are allied to each other, but they don't call themselves a party, and so nobody's accountable.
Is there a left and right on council? Is there partisanship of sorts, even if it's not,
One
clear?
would think so. One would think there was split on the left and right basis, but now we have one leader of the one side who is supposedly a very right-wing person, and yet makes a lot of left-wing votes. Very disturbing.
Yes.
And we have the majority, with the mayor being the so-called leader, who quite often develop fairly strong left-wing agendas. Mixed in with right-wing business, so-called business propositions. It's a very mixed bag. Nobody's accountable.
It's a very strange thing to hear a fellow like Joe Fontana talk 0% tax increase. He's the last guy I would have thought would ever say that. Is 0% doable?
Of course. I've already said before, earlier in this show, that the amount of money that's being spent has grown dramatically in the City of London, more than one would tally up on the percentage increases. So if politicians were really reasonable and spent the time and had a proper budget, as we did, and a budget system, as we did, and I'm not saying we were better, we just simply had a better system to look at what was being spent, it would not be difficult to get the city back into a leaner organization.
The police budget seems to be the one budget that always comes in asking for more and more and more. Do you think that there's any way to cut the police budget?
Very difficult to do for several reasons. First of all, they're protected by the Police Act. Secondly, the provincial organization requires a certain number of policemen per capita, or pretty near, something like 700 population per policeman. And then there's all kind of other compounding causes, number of crimes and so on. Crime in itself has gone down, but that's the countable crime, the one that is announced, or the ones that is sorted out. So it's very hard to sort all that out. However, the police system, you'd have to look at the efficiency of how they dispatch their officers. If you wanted to do some cutting. And you're not allowed to do that because municipal council has absolutely no authority.
It's micromanaging.
They cannot. It's in the Police Act. They cannot go and ask on the line-by-line budget, as some people have done or have said in this council. They can only agree or disagree with the budget.
Can we go back just for a moment and talk about the groups that you were mentioning in City Hall, two basic groups. One of those groups apparently met outside of council at a restaurant, and of course there was a whole hullabaloo and a bit of a scandal over all of that, and now there's a call for an ethics commissioner.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think of the idea of an ethics commissioner? Isn't that sort of a way of saying that the people on council right now are so immature that they need somebody to tell them what the difference between right and wrong? What do you think?
Oh, I think it's overblown. And the people getting together to discuss things, big deal. That happens all the time. Who's kidding? You think that the other group doesn't get together to discuss things?
Well, it's against the Act, Municipal Act.
Well, yeah, all right. Fine. So the Act has to be looked at and said, behave in accordance with good moral principles, do your job, and get on and do it in behalf of the city. Unfortunately, people are now picking at everything they can. If a mayor is strong and competent and capable, that mayor can exercise a lot of influence on the proper behavior and actions of the council.
So you do not need an ethics commissioner, you're saying?
You need good, strong moral background. I think we've gotten away from that in many parts of our life and our society. Mm-hmm. And council just simply reflects the way society behaves.
Oh, dear.
It almost seems to me that often the political agendas and goals of a lot of the people there have to be opposed to normal ethics, because they basically, a lot of them want something for nothing. If it were up to you, where would you begin cutting back on spending at City Hall? What would be your number one areas that you might say could go without anybody really feeling the pinch too hard?
Well, I don't know that any one area could go.
Well, just generally, or cut down.
I think one would look at it from the other way and start saying, what do I absolutely need? Start from that angle, and then you put into place the things you absolutely need, and work down to a target that you say our people can afford. And what's left over are the things that I can now dispense to the other programs that are asking for money.
That's an excellent, refreshing way to look at it, because I'm always looking at it, what do we have right now? Let's cut back to what I think is proper. But you're saying, let's pretend that no city exists at the moment. If we were to build a city, how would we build it? What would we need to build a proper city?
Of course.
That's a great way of looking at it.
Well, we did have a budget system. We called it program budgeting. Other places, they call it zero-based budget, which is a small difference from what we had. And under program budget, everything was put in place in accordance with the number of people that were assigned to the program, the amount of operational cost that was with it, and the amount of capital cost. And in the ongoing consequences of running this program over a number of years. In other words, it looks good today, but 5 years from now, we're going to have major expenses if we keep doing this. And so we were able to look at that and say, do we need this? Do we need this much of it? And we went program by program, and we knew what we were buying. And we knew very well that the infrastructure comes first. That's why the municipality exists. And from there, we backed into the nice to have and would like to have sort of areas. There's something else that's grown into our society, and most of it has been from our provincial edicts, and that is social programs. The province is very good at demanding social programs, but they only enact a policy. Municipalities are left to pick up the tab. Mm-hmm. And that is...
That's a complete disconnect as far as I'm concerned. It shouldn't even exist.
No, there's a lot of problems with that, because suddenly we find that, for instance, if you're in the 18th percentile lower wage, you're automatically called poor. Well, it doesn't matter how much people are making and how much wages grow or otherwise. If you're in that percentile, you're always poor. Well, guess what? You just simply keep growing and you never catch up. There is a mentality here that is counterproductive.
Going to take a quick break for now, and when we return, we will continue our conversation with former Controller Orlando Zamprogna on City Hall and all the problems that we're having down there. I want to talk about the downtown when we return for a second. Okay?
Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, little boxes on the hillside, little boxes all the same. There's a green one, and a pink one, and a blue one, and a yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same. And the people in the houses all went to the university curiosity where they were put in boxes, and they all came out the same. And there's doctors and lawyers and business executives, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same.
Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, little boxes on the hillside, little boxes all the same. There's a green one and a pink one and a blue one and a yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same. And there's doctors, and there's lawyers, and there's business executives, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same.
We're back with the Oz. And Orlando, what do you think about downtown? What killed downtown? Or is it alive? Or is it... every city seems to be completely absorbed with making its downtown vibrant, and it seems the more effort we put into it, I'm not seeing exactly the results, but I keep hearing people saying that good things are happening.
Well,
are they?
Front page, if I could just interrupt for a second, front page of the Free Press, was it yesterday? Big Blue Bubble, I think is the name of a company that is moving out of downtown because of the crime, because of the vagrants, because of the being accosted on the street by so-called homeless people. What's going on?
A lot of things happen to downtowns, and I mean, people have written books, so don't expect me to answer that one. However, I can tell you that the moment you started building malls and big box stores outside the center of the city, then automatically you're taking away that influx of people that used to just automatically go downtown. So that's happened. The other thing that's happened is we've had provincial legislation that have allowed a whole lot of people who used to be in institutional settings drift, so to speak, which is sad. And now the best place for them to be is downtown. Well, you know, that doesn't exactly attract a whole lot of other people going down there. It just, that cultural change has happened. Municipality, for whatever reason, put the check office for welfare checks down at the corner of Dundas and Richmond. Well, you know, a whole new culture developed around there with cash being taken in, people giving them instant money for 10 or 20% reduction, all kind of nasty, what I call bad things happened.
There's a lot of murders going on that corner.
Well, no, not too good. And one would wonder about the wisdom of the way this has been planned. Let me put it this way: the only two people were opposed to that particular plan back when it was put into effect, and we were shamed, I think, into believing that things could improve as a result of doing things that way. Well, you know, you can spend a lot of money, and you can pretend that we had facelift money being spent, we had upgrades being spent, and next thing you know, you got landlords taking advantage of that and asking for the city to build them parking garages. Well, you know, it just doesn't stop. You can pump a whole pile of money, but until we change our structure of our municipality, we will have a very rough downtown setting.
To speak to my own experience regarding downtown, and perhaps even London East, you know, just east of Adelaide there, where they used to have the crick in the road and all that.
I wouldn't call that London East, Bob. By the way, I live in London East, and it's 9 kilometers from that crick in the road.
But it's east of downtown.
Okay, that's London Centre to me.
Okay. But I stopped going to those areas to shop as soon as they got rid of the street parking. And it struck me that that is a death knell to any downtown. You don't have to have long street parking, but you should have available street parking, because there is that kind of shopper, if you're looking for that clientele. who just goes in, dashes in, goes out, doesn't want to be downtown for 10 years and doesn't want to carry around all this stuff, so he has to take the bus.
Again, we have a confrontation of ideologies here. The city subsidizes to a very large extent the bus system because they want people to use the bus, get out of the cars. It's the environmental thing to do. It's the good thing to do. People can't afford cars and all those good things. And you don't want to have parking because parking is a nasty thing to have. So we subsidize the bus transit system. Well, guess what? Right now, they're subsidizing parking systems. And they're buying a parking lots, which are underground, which are worth $25,000 to $30,000 per spot. Well, you never make that money back. You have to subsidize it. And why is that? Because the people downtown are saying, we need the parking. Well, make up your mind. What is your direction? What are you trying to do? And if you want to subsidize bus transit, build a different city. If you want to subsidize parking, then you have a different proportion again. We just seem to be doing everything at once and spending money and not achieving anything for which we have set a goal. There is no goal.
No vision, are you saying?
And that's probably the better word. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what they call their plans or the vision for London.
What is all this? What is all this rethinking London? Have you been following all of these surveys and efforts on the various parts of the administration and politicians? What is all that nonsense about? I don't feel like I have even any right to put my input into how somebody else should run their business downtown.
I have tried. I've actually put some input into it. I've heard nothing back. So I don't know. It's not the first time this has been tried. This is just more glorified, as I can see it.
It sounds to me as if, I've seen this before at the Board of Ed, where you have public input sessions, and of course the minds were made up long before by administration, not necessarily councillors or trustees, but administration has made up their mind long before about what they want to do as city planners. Then they have to go through the onerous process of having public input, which they politely accept, but then go off and do what they were planning to do in the first place. It's a total sham.
This could happen in the city again. As I said before, there may be a whole lot of things come out of this that are worthwhile. However, they can't be implemented. There's no money. You can have the best plans in the world, and plans and ideas and policies are all wonderful, but the first hurdle is money. And money isn't everything, but if you can't jump that hurdle, don't even talk about it. All you're doing is raising the expectations of people and then let them down and get people all upset all over again. So the city has a structural problem right now, and it's called deficit. And they cannot implement great, wonderful things until they come to grips with the fact that they have no money.
Do you even see it possible? How big is the deficit? How long would it take this city to get back in a healthy situation based on
10 to 20 years, if they put their minds to it.
And that's if they put their minds to it.
If they put their minds to it.
And
the same
not.
happens provincially, and the same happens. You always hear, we can get money from the feds, or we can get money from the province. Well, they're next to bankrupt themselves for crying out loud. Who are we kidding?
I mean, who wants to know that McGinty and his type are running the city? Isn't all this, we want to get the public's opinion, isn't that just an admission that they are out of ideas and out of
basically, when you get right down to it, it's an admission that we can't do it, we don't know how to do it, so we'll pass the crux over to the public, let them give us all their ideas, we'll put them all together, see if they match what we want in the first place, and then we'll get on, we'll say, here's the plan. Well, that's very nice. Where's the money? And the plan can be improved, and it should be improved, and I'm all for it, but not at the expense of rising expectations that cannot be met.
For example, the current suggestion to have the new exchange at the 401 is going to cost many $1 million. Is that an investment you think would be worth, at least for the future of the city? Is Joe right about that? He seems
all
very,
these things
very
are
dedicated
great.
to that.
You can do a lot of investing, but there is no wiggle room. At what point can you do that?
I understand he's talking about charging an extra tax for that. What they had a name for it? Some kind of development tax, surtax, or some kind of levy. Yes.
No, that's
is that going to do it?
No, people are not going to buy that. They're fed up. They haven't got any money. People haven't got any money because they've already spent their money.
We got about 3 minutes left, Oz. Name
With
a
that.
couple of things, if you could, what this city council right now can do to get us out of this deficit that we're in and to bring the city back on track.
Well, they really need to be more cooperative. That's the first thing. And that means they all have to bury their own personal expectations of where they want to be. Leave the power game alone until 2 years from now and get on with that. They really need to realize that they need to take money out of their operating funds and put it towards paying down their debt so they can put into place the things that they need to put into place to look to the future. And until they do that, they will forever be choked by a big debt and a big operating fund.
Is it too late to divest ourselves, the city, of some of the big mega projects that are big stones around our neck? Convention Center, Bud Gardens, things of that nature?
Oh, those things are in place and cannot be changed. All you can do is become more efficient. The Budweiser Center is one terrible mess, and they'll just have to keep on paying until they stop paying it. There are other areas that people don't want to approach. For instance, why is the city in the golf game, except that most people like to play golf? Why are we building ice arenas when the number of kids is reducing? Why are we building recreation centers?
Again, it
and
sounds like we're in
subsidizing?
the entertainment business.
We're in the entertainment business big time because, as I said, 2,000 years ago, the public realized they want circuses.
Any chance you returning to politics?
I'm a little bit past that game. I told you why I left.
I'm sorry to hear that. Okay.
Well,
Thank you, Oz.
We sure got a lot of topics in today, and that's all we have time for. Thank you for joining us, Orlando. I hope we can have you back again sometime to continue the conversation.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
We got to go. So join us again next week when we'll continue our journey in the right direction. Until then, be right, stay right, do right, act right, think right, and be right back here. We'll see you then.
Fade into color and color into black and white. Under the bedclothes, everything will be alright.
Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, little boxes, little boxes, little boxes all the same. There's a green one and a pink one and a blue one and a yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky and they all look just the same. And the people in the houses all go to the university and they all get put in boxes, little boxes all the same. And there's doctors and there's lawyers and business executives, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky and they all look just the same.